I'm Luke Storey. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. What's cracking? What's popping? What's up? It's Sunday. It's the holy day. It's the day of rest, folks. The first time ever that I've released an episode on a Sunday. And this is a bonus episode. You know, sometimes on Fridays we drop the bonus shows. This is an extra bonus show, which is a recording of me as a guest on the Lacy Phillips Expanded podcast. She's been on my show a couple times, one of my most popular guests of all time. So she invited me on her show a few months ago when she launched. And then we decided to just kind of swap and release each other's shows on each other's shows. You know what I mean? Which is something I've been wanting to do for a while, due to the fact that 3 years ago when I started this podcast, I started appearing on a lot of other shows. And I think I've been on over 100 podcasts at this point. Sometimes the conversations are really enlightening, really enjoyable. Sometimes they go for 1, 2, 3 hours, and they're pretty deep dives. And so Lacy released her last appearance on my show as a bonus episode in her feed. We call that a feed, you know, your podcast feed in iTunes. And so I thought, what the hell, I'm going to do that too. So every couple Sundays, I'm just going to drop a show on you. And what the hell. But before we get into today's show, which again is not my show, this is the Lacy Phillips Expanded podcast, which is a fantastic podcast on its own, by the way, even when I'm not on it. This Tuesday, we've got Dave Asprey coming back on for his second appearance, where we talk about mindset and emotional freedom, the inner work of biohacking. So a lot of people talk to Dave about all the latest physical hacks and practices, but we really get down to some of the psychology. And then the following Tuesday will be your pal Luke live in London for my birthday show on October 29th. What? That's right. Here's what we talk about in this episode with Lacy. And this is a juicy one, guys. This is sex, drugs, and rock and roll with a little bit of God thrown in there. We talk about my upbringing with my quasi-hippie mom. She hates when I call her a hippie because she was a mod, she says. But she burned incense and wore floral dresses and listened to the Eagles. So I don't know. What are you going to do? And my cowboy dad, growing up in Northern California and going to the dark side of drugs in elementary school, having my first spiritual experience, listening to Jimi Hendrix, my journey of moving to LA in 1989 and playing in tons of bands, getting in lots of trouble, going to boarding school and getting sober when I was 14 the first time, what it's like to hop from addiction to addiction, how my low self-worth was reflected in the world around me and the destruction that ensued as a result, what it was like to get sober from heroin, the experience of going to rehab, and finally unraveling the traumas of my past that led me there to begin with, and my experience in recovery groups and the difference between true sobriety and being a dry drunk, as we say, observing the self and realizing the self beyond ego, and the benefits that I've received from many years of Vedic meditation, the effect of modern culture on our biology, how to strengthen your nervous system through Kundalini yoga, getting reconnected to the rhythms of nature, the basic things everyone can do to improve their health and well-being, the concept of non-duality and how it leads to a fruitful and satisfactory life, free resources to raise your consciousness and reprogram your subconscious mind, how to determine calibrations of your own consciousness, and finally, as a random bonus, my top travel tips. So enjoy this episode of the Expanded podcast with Lacy Phillips.
We're here today with Luke Storey. And if you haven't already checked out, I'm on his podcast twice. So go listen to those now because it's an incredible podcast. My friend Meredith Baird actually introduced me to your podcast officially, I think, a year and a half ago.
Really?
And she was like, you're going to love this. You're going to love all of the guests. And I totally fell in love with it. So when you reached out to me, you were one of the few people's podcasts that I knew. And I was like, oh my God, yes, I absolutely. What an honor.
That's so cool. And was it not your first one? The first podcast?
Yours was my very first one. Yes. And then it was like an avalanche after that.
Yeah.
So many.
That's good. I like getting to people first. I've had the opportunity to do that a couple times where someone creates content in a different space. They write, they do videos, something like that. Authors or obscure doctors or scientists, and no one knows about them outside of their field. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's this whole thing, podcasting. Come on in.
Oh, it's the best. I think it's the number one digested medium, I think nowadays.
Yeah, because you can multitask.
Yeah.
I listen to podcasts. I think I could honestly say, yeah, every single day I listen to a podcast or a portion of one.
Well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Let's get right back to the beginning. Tell us about your cultural upbringing, which I know, but let's tell the listeners your background and your cultural upbringing.
I'm so excited to be here. I enjoyed our first two conversations, and I love being able to talk more, because when you're the host of a podcast, I'm always struggling with, I'm like, have this inner voice, shut up, Luke, let the guest talk. You know what I mean? Because my shows are more conversational anyway, and it's just how I roll, but it's nice to be like, okay,
you're like, the mic is mine.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm 48. I've had a colorful life. I always say my hippie mom moved from Berkeley to Aspen, married my cowboy dad, and that's how I've always kind of started the origin story. But recently I visited my mom up in Sonoma County, and she was like, God, I hate when you call me a hippie. Like, hippies are gross.
Wow.
My mom was like a mod.
Yeah.
Really.
So she was a beatnik.
Yeah. She was San Francisco 60s, and she's like, ooh, hippies like were on the street and, did heroin.
Having sex with everyone.
Yeah. She was like, oh no, hippies were like dirty. I wasn't a hippie. Stop calling me that. And I was like, well, Mom, you don't get it now in this generation. Like, hippies are super cool. We look at Woodstock and we're like, dude, your mom was at Woodstock. That's so cool. And she's like, yeah, it wasn't really cool, So mom was not I called her a hippie because when I was a kid, there was like incense smoke and pot smoke in the air around the neighborhood, and the Eagles were always playing, and it was a very 70s kind of vibe. Floral dresses, I don't know, to me she's a quasi-hippie anyway.
Sounds like it to me.
So she and very very liberal, forward thinking. But she went to Colorado, fell in love with my dad in Aspen, who was a super rugged cowboy, ski patrolman, stock car racer, rodeo star, just a phenomenally textured man. And then they only lasted till I was about 3. And then I moved back to California with my mom to the Bay Area where I grew up. And, we didn't have a lot of money. We lived in pretty, it wasn't like Compton, but we lived in pretty downtrodden neighborhoods, low income neighborhoods. And my dad had money, but I didn't live with him except on vacation and stuff like that. So I got to, eat well when I went to visit my dad, and my mom took care of me. She was a waitress, and, we didn't have money. So there was a lot of risk in the environment. There were a lot of drugs and bikers and lowriders, which is like pre-cholos. They used to be called lowriders. They had longer hair with hairnets, the Latino gangbangers, When I moved to LA, I was like, why do they all have shaved heads? It's a new thing. And that was in the 90s. But yeah, so when I was a kid, I had a very dysfunctional family, and there was a lot of drugs around the neighborhood. And in that culture, I think what kind of happened now in retrospect, looking back, was when the summer of love ended and Haight-Ashbury kind of came to a screeching halt because hard drugs came in and all of that stuff, a lot of the hippies migrated north and sort of just, made these encampments and communities up there in those towns like Sebastopol and
Marin,
Guerneville and Marin and all those places where I grew up. And so there was just, there was a lot of like drug smuggling and just gnarly kind of dark energy up there. And as a sort of response to the lack of family, I guess, in a sense, and what was there was pretty dysfunctional, the response to me was go into survival mode and just get deeply into drugs, which I did when I was a kid, in elementary school. And so thankfully I had that to save me.
Totally, yeah.
Which ultimately became my demise. But that was in lieu of, going to a psychiatrist and getting help and getting on meds or having some kind of therapy. It was just like, wow, the adults are kind of checked out to a degree. And so
self-medicate.
Yeah, and that's how I took care of myself. And then also when I was young, I discovered music, and that was like my first spiritual experience really was listening to Jimi Hendrix and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and just smoking weed and just going into these other realms and, riding my bike around the country. And, I had some fun, but there was also, the childhood was punctuated with some traumatic experiences. So fast forward to 1989, when I was 19, I moved to Hollywood because I was super into music. And San Francisco was kind of the city that you moved to where I grew up when you were ready to flee, but San Francisco was so sleepy and boring, and there wasn't really a great music scene at that time. So I came to LA and ended up, meeting a bunch of my childhood rock and roll heroes and hanging out with them and doing drugs with them and just had a blast. Got a fake ID when I was 19. And so there I am living in Hollywood with my fake ID, playing in bands and doing copious amounts of drugs because I didn't have to be accountable to my parents. And I didn't have to have a job because I could just sell drugs to support my habit. And I had a lot of fun. I was a good looking kid, and the older girls liked me, Yeah. So I had all these older friends that played in bands and stuff. I was like 19, 20. They were all like 30. And I had like these girls that sort of took me under their wing, would take me out to clubs and stuff. And, it was just insanely fun. But at the same time, early 90s in Hollywood was pretty sketchy.
Oh, yeah.
I lived behind the Chinese theater.
I can't even imagine. What was Vine and Sunset like?
Yeah, that's like where I lived, on Orange in Hollywood. And there was a lot of crack in that area. And heroin, not so much. You had to go to downtown LA, which was kind of a hassle. But
I think you still do.
Probably, yeah. I eventually figured that out. Found my way eventually. But yeah, it's one of those things where, and people that are no longer doing drugs and drinking like myself have a similar story. I think it's said like it was fun, and then it was fun with problems, and then it was problems, and then it was problems with problems, and it was that kind of thing. But what had started out as a really fun, innocent, I'm going to move to Hollywood and be a rock star and do tons of drugs and be free, ended up being really imprisoned within addiction and just a lot of really depraved situations that I put myself in. And just like, even now, certain streets I drive by, I just go like, oh God, like the memories are just imprinted, just dark times of just degradation and just the lowest of self-worth, just.
Absolutely.
Even like when you're in a really low place like that, at least for me, there was still this small voice that was kind of going, you're better than this.
Yeah, there's more meant for you than this.
Because I'd gone to this sort of reform school, boarding school when I was 14 for 2 years in Idaho. It was kind of this cult, weird sort of brainwashing, self-help-esque kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It was fucking bizarre. But in there, I got some sense of who I was and some sense of truth and salvation. And I sobered up for 2 years from 14 to 16. And I didn't, I stopped committing crimes. And I was, before that, I was having all these problems with the police, and they were going to send me away to kids' prison for a long time and all this stuff. So I got out of there and I had a sense of who I was. And I just didn't realize that I was already a full-blown drug addict. So from like 16 years old to 19, moving to Hollywood, I had started to dabble and all of that stuff. And then it got super, super dark, and still realized that, oh God, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, but I knew it wasn't that.
What was your come to moment where you realized, like, I have more meant for me than this, or your spiritual experience that made you go and get sober?
There were two, actually. There were a bunch of them. I'll give you the main ones. There was kind of a long drawn out period from maybe 93 to 97 where the hard drugs started to really take over, and I would try and quit one of them, and then it was like whack-a-mole, whereas when I went to treatment, they said, you were switching seats in the Titanic. That's what they call it, In the end, the ship's going down, that kind of thing.
Doesn't matter which one you want to do.
Yeah, but that was actually really scary because I thought that I'd have something beat. I would get off heroin and be like, okay, cool, I'm never doing that again. That was a nightmare. And then I'm like, you know what? I'll just smoke crack, This was the logic that I had. And so there was a long period of that, of just like, God, just getting defeated over and over again, trying to quit. And I just couldn't, or to moderate. And just like, my dream was always to just smoke weed. It's like, I would fine with quitting drinking and quitting hard drugs, but God, I've got to smoke weed. Yeah. And so there was a battle for a few years of trying to like wrestle myself, my willpower into allowing that to happen, because that medicine was actually pretty good for me. I mean, I was not very productive and forgot to pay bills a lot and stuff, but I wasn't terribly destructive when I just smoked weed. It was the other drugs that got me to just be in really sordid places with dark people and just, super bad news. So there was that kind of long period, and that progressed to work out to be like, oh my God, I can't make it a day without all of this stuff. And then in the end, I'm just doing everything all at once, all the time, 24/7. And that started to feel like, it felt like I was a slave. That's what, because
when you didn't own yourself anymore.
Yeah, when I became free, I didn't even know what it felt like to be free, which is the next story I'll get to. But I didn't know what it was like to be free. And once I was free, I was like, holy shit, I was enslaved. I really was. I was just completely under the spell of some little powder or pill or something, that my whole life revolves around like a $20 piece of fucking garbage, from some field in Mexico. You know what I mean? It's just like, wow, this is the sum total of my life at 24, 25, 26. So there was a couple pivotal moments where I had an awakening. And it's funny because I didn't remember this first one for a long, long time, but it was actually a psychedelic experience. Now, I was trying to just get high and party. I used to sell mushrooms. So I didn't realize they were also like in the same class as cocaine and heroin and stuff. So I could have gone to prison. I didn't know that. I was like, what? Shrooms? No big deal. It's like weed.
It's like weed.
Like Schedule 1.
You thought it was Schedule a misdemeanor.
Yeah. Because I would never sell hard drugs because I was super paranoid of going to prison. So I just sold weed. And then I sold mushrooms for a long time. And someone's like, dude, that's Schedule 1. If you get caught with 5 pounds of mushrooms, you're going to prison. So I ate a bunch of mushrooms one night in this apartment building where I live called Disgraceland. And
the irony.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been torn down, which I was so happy about. One day I drove by and it was a parking lot.
What's the energy there?
When they redid the Chinese theater and did all that and made it nicer, I was like, oh my, thank God that building is gone because I had so many horrific memories. But anyway, I'm on shrooms and I was talking to my buddy, Repo, this guy from Finland, and we played in a band together, and he was like wanting to party and get drunk and smoke weed and just be on mushrooms. And I started having a goddamn meltdown. And I remember saying to him, I was like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I gotta stop. I can't do this. Like there's something else I'm supposed to be doing. And I was just crying and crying and crying. And then, of course, woke up the next day and was like, okay, where's the drugs? That was a nightmare, And so shortly after that was the first little awakening where I started, man, I'm getting close. It's like when you watch a cartoon and the characters are in a little boat going down a river and they're about to go over the big waterfall. It was that kind of thing. And I got the sense like, oh shit, the waterfall is really close.
What was the waterfall for you?
Getting physically injured, like out on the street. I had a few close calls where like I was just blessed to not be hurt, and then get in trouble with the law. I think one of my biggest values is freedom. It's something I've always really fought for in many regards. So the idea of prison is just the ultimate antithesis of one thing that I really value more than anything, which is just the freedom to move about the world. And so I was really afraid of going to prison, and I was starting to get a lot more sloppy. I was pretty clever at avoiding the police. I wasn't like America's dumbest criminals. Like I used to have friends who would go downtown and buy heroin, and they would sit and do it in the car right on the corner where they got it. And I'm like, you dumbasses, even if you're sick, you got to make it back home, and have it like in your mouth so you can swallow it if you get pulled over. I mean, there's all these protocols that dope fiends develop.
Abide by,
and some of them are fucking dumb. And so I wasn't that dumb, but I was starting to get that way because I was becoming so desperate,
reckless,
and just like mentally deranged and all of that. Just kind of mental illness started to set in. It's funny being so graphic with these stories, but whatever.
It's great for the person who's out there struggling. You know who you're probably one of the biggest expanders for is my mom, who's like still heavily, really suffering with addiction. In fact, she had a rock bottom happen this last holiday, and I think she's going to go to Betty Ford on the 1st of February.
Oh God, I hope so.
Me too. So it's actually really expansive for somebody out there.
Well,
it makes me emotional.
It took me a long time actually to talk about things this candidly because I've had a lot of shame around it. It's like, there's one side of it is like, it's sort of sensational. You could be like, well, I'm fucking badass. Like, look at this cool stuff I've been through. I'm a survivor. Yeah. So there's like maybe a little ego fodder in that you have, a rich history that's sensational in that way. But for me, it was like I hesitated talking about things in this much detail because it was just like, God, I felt like kind of a loser. I had so much shame for all of those years to finally come out to people like outside of the realm of my inner circle in recovery and stuff. But then as I started to do it, I would like drip out a little more information, and then I get feedback from people. Yeah. And I get DMs all the time from people like, oh my God, I'm sober 2 years. You're such an inspiration.
I love that.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm just kind of like, whatever, man. It's like it's not my life anymore. And perhaps if someone hears that and they're like, oh my God, I'm the one that shoots up at the spot downtown still.
Yeah, totally.
I'm that dumbass. I just got out of jail, to know that there's a way out. And there's God, you want to talk about a different universe that I live in now. I mean, it's like, it's just.
Yeah, it's from like Vampire Land.
I have we can get into that, but my whole soul experience on the planet is just, I literally live in a different universe than I used to.
It is actually such a depiction of vibration. Like truly, the unseen of energy and frequency and vibration. You're somebody who has lived at the spectrums of it and throughout. So it really is so true that you live in a totally different universe, attracting completely different things versus that point. But continue.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, now at this point in my life, the thing that's fun about it, to be able to kind of dip into this and go back there, to tell the story, is there's so much contrast. I feel like, God, I've lived a lot for someone my age. There's so many different sort of...
If only you were a writer.
Yeah, right.
You're a biohacker, but if only you were a writer.
Well,
you're so
it's
much
funny,
more.
actually. Durek introduced me to his book agent recently.
Good.
Yeah. And I was like pitching her a couple ideas. She's actually the life story. I was like, I don't know if anyone would be interested in this, but here's a couple of the touch points. And she was like, dude, that's an amazing story. That's your book. I was like, okay. I just feel like there's a bunch of I survived drug addiction books. But I guess each story is unique. So anyway, what happened was there was two major turning points. One was I had, specifically with the opiates, I really, really struggled to stay off of them. And every time I would quit, I would do kind of what I called a train spotting kick. And that's where you pay someone to lock you up somewhere where you don't have access to a vehicle and you can't get, it's like drug buddy rehab, I would be with someone who was a drug addict. They're still doing it, but they wouldn't give me any,
Yeah.
And so I did one of those, and it was in, some really heinous, hot part of the valley, Tarzana or something like that. Yeah. In this really scummy apartment in my drug buddy's house. And I was rolling around on the floor there. There was no bed, just on a gross carpet, just kicking, taking copious amounts of pills that were not opiates, but that would knock you out, drinking alcohol, anything I could do to just be super loaded to not notice the withdrawal of the heroin.
Yeah.
It's funny because Byron Katie, who's one of my favorite teachers, she has a similar story where she woke up and came to, and there was cockroaches crawling on her. And that was what happened for me. They weren't on me though. They were just around me.
Yep.
And I was so weak. I couldn't really get them out of the way. And I'm sort of half conscious, just going wow, this is my life. I'm on a dirty goddamn carpet in Tarzana. And I'm down here with the roaches. We're in the same space here. You know what
Completely.
I mean? Sharing space with cockroaches in the valley. And that was the moment of surrender. And I got on the phone with my mom. And
look at Mark right too. So it's okay.
It's so funny. It's 22 years ago that happened, but it's I still just have such a visceral memory of what that was like, because it's I've been fighting most of my life. I just been fighting and fighting and surviving and surviving. And I just wouldn't relinquish control, and that was the moment where I was I am spent. I literally have no answers left, because I had no money. I knew that I was going to come back to Hollywood and I was going to get $20 together and I was going to get well. And then I'd be right back there again, but I literally had nothing. And then the next thing is, you get robbed, you get arrested, you lose your apartment, you become homeless, you become a street person. And I was right on the verge of that, And so that little voice that I was saying was nah, you've got to do it. And so, I called my mom, God bless her, and she had the wherewithal to get me into a rehab. And so,
wonderful.
Yeah, 2 days later, I'm on a plane from LA to San Francisco, just getting shit-faced, pounding tequila the whole time.
You're is it sort of that I'm going to binge before I go?
Oh, God, yeah, leaving Las Vegas, man.
Totally.
Yeah. I made it to the San Francisco airport, drinking on the hour flight, just chugging whatever I could. And then in the San Francisco airport, I went to the bar and I kept drinking, and I almost missed my flight to Santa Rosa. Got off the plane there. And it's funny. My mom, I thought I was going to go to my mom's and party for a few days. I had this idea. She's like, okay, cool. Yeah, great to see you. Let's go. You're checking in tonight. And I was like, whoa. No, not tonight. I'm in a few days,
Yeah.
So I sat in the Santa Rosa airport, and got really shit-faced. And I kept drinking all the way out to the rehab out in the woods and had my last drink and my last, I was like hyperventilating big spliffs in the parking lot. And I knew that was the last one.
You did inside your body?
That was
wow.
it. It was my last. I knew it was my last drink.
Wow.
Yeah, in that parking lot, some really good beer, some microbrew beer.
At that state, I'm actually like.
Well, I had her
inspired.
stop at the liquor store on the way there, and I was like, I'm not going to have my last drink be, Milwaukee's Best or something.
Yeah, a 40.
So I got some really King Cobra 40. I got some great beer, and I just pounded and then checked myself in, and the next real pivot point there was that I understood by that point that I couldn't help myself. And I also understood, I'd been to a couple 12-step meetings and I was aware that that's where you kind of go, but I was not very interested in that route.
I don't think anybody is that I've ever met. And because I'm obviously surrounded by so many people in recovery and addiction in my family, but even my mom just went to a meeting a week ago and she's like, of course, I sit down to the homeless guy that's like starts yelling out and freaking out. Right, and it's a very small town, so there's nobody that inspires. And I've never met somebody who's like, oh, I'm so stoked to do AA.
Yeah, people don't go to 12-step meetings because their life is on point.
Yeah. Although I've known a few in LA because there's a scene.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, but this is really, I think the single most profound moment of my life was coming to February 15th, 1997 in that rehab and going to the nurse or, the counselor and being like, I'm super sick. Like, you guys got to give me something. Can I get a shot of something? And they took my vitals and they're like, no, you're good. We got nothing for you. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? I'm freaking out. And they said, well, you get on your knees and you pray to God.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? No, you get some Demerol prayer? I was like, are you serious? So even though I kind of knew that was coming, I thought it was going to be an easier sort of transition and I'd have some help there with the physical part of it. And I didn't. And I'm so grateful because I literally had no choice but to just ask whatever God was, which I was not really raised with any religion or anything like that. I think I was probably a bit more interested in the Eastern path and, picked up a couple books on meditation and, Vedic philosophy and things like that. Some of my family had been going to India and having pretty profound spiritual experiences. So, I had an idea that I could approach spirituality from that place, but I had definitely never prayed before. Mm-hmm. And
what was that like your first time?
I was so out of it. I don't remember exactly. I just remember kind of just to get the mechanics of it physically. Like, I'm like, okay, I think you put your hands together and then you get like at the foot of the bed. And I think, it's just like, how do they do it on Little House on the Prairie or something? I was like thinking of movies like pray. Okay, so you do this. And and my prayer was just like, I think they gave me the words probably because it's not words that I would have come up with, but just, God, please remove this obsession. Just, I want to be free. Just, God, just make me sober or whatever the words were. But I think really why it worked is I was just completely humbled and I had just completely surrendered and I was totally out of answers. And that's the sweet spot where Source can really get in and do its work.
When there's no more control.
Yeah, it's that, we're given this amazing gift of free will. And if you want to go be a pedophile serial killer, go nuts. No one's going to stop you. God's not going to stop you. In other words, we have the spectrum from the lowest of low energies to the highest of the angelic. And you can play around within that realm here on this plane.
Yeah, the physical plane.
Yeah. And so I was allowed to do whatever I wanted and I did. But when it hurt enough, it's the great thing about this loving God that I experienced in my life. It's like I didn't have to do anything to earn the grace. I just had to be humble enough to say, okay, I realize that you've given me this will and I've used it. I'm now handing it back to you. I'm good. You know what I mean? It's like,
exactly. Yeah.
I am so done and I will do anything I have to do in order to maintain, sobriety. And then in that moment, I was set free. It's just from that moment until this moment now, I've never, ever once remotely considered doing drugs or drinking. I've never had a craving or compulsion that was strong enough to get me in motion toward it at all. I mean, sure, the odd fantasy or I'm sure when I was new, I was so uncomfortable. I was like, God, I wish I could just have a drink.
Something,
I would drink near beers and shit, sometimes, but I never was compelled like I used to be. I was set free. And so the past 22 years has really been about, really just expanding that phenomena into other areas of my life, into finance, like we've talked about, and into sexuality and relationships, and into unraveling other traumas that were sort of revealed later that I didn't even that I didn't even know had affected me, And so it's now more about allowing that surrender experience and allowing myself to be guided in all areas of my life. And I've had to cling to some of those and really hit bottoms in other areas too, where I become willing, like you and I've talked.
Where the magic happens.
Yeah.
What would you say your biggest rock bottom was? Was it during that time?
I mean, I don't think it gets much worse than the cockroaches in Tarzana or Reseda or wherever it was. I mean,
I don't know if it's the valley that's worse. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No offense to anyone living in the valley, but in 1997 and whenever that was, January, super depressing. Oh,
there's
God.
Porn being shot in the next room.
Yeah, totally, the porn capital of the world. I think that was really, it was those years were just a long drawn out bottom, but that moment was the moment that was just like, this can't go on. But there's been a lot of them, there's been a few, there's been moments with money and debt and just not being in control of that area of my life. There's been moments of relationships that were painful and not healthy. So I think in all the different areas of life, there's been, for me at least, I have to get pretty uncomfortable before, again, I'm willing to really surrender that part of my life. Like if you come to me and say, hey, Luke, this is how you should relate romantically and this is how you should approach your sexuality. I'd be like, I'm having fun doing it my way. I've got this shit figured out, which is what I thought through, my 30s, I would say. And, and then at a certain point finding either that's becoming dissatisfactory or painful or just unfulfilling or empty. And then going like, well, again, here I am out of answers, and then start to explore wisdom in those different areas and then start to actually invite a higher power into all areas of my life, which is where I am now. And it's so interesting, going back to what I was saying about things are so different. It's like now my entire life has been surrendered.
All areas. Because I even got to watch you in the relationship field. I'm watching you in the financial field. Like I've seen you even, and you really are like surrendering to all of those, and magic's happening out of them.
Oh, it's insane. That's the thing, it's so funny about the human will and about the ego is the ego is so funny. It's like watching my dog, I always look at animals and you can see ego. It's like they think they're so clever and you're going like, I know what you're doing right now. That's the ego thinks, oh no, I've got this all figured out. I know what I'm doing. It's like, no, you don't know what you're doing. You're serving the lower self. And so, I have surrendered that. And what's so funny about it is all the ways and, just say like love and romance. Okay. All the ways in which my ego and my psyche tried to protect me so that I wouldn't get hurt.
Yes.
Actually ended up hurting me more than getting hurt.
Always.
And becoming vulnerable, and so now, exploring a new relationship as I am for the past 3 months.
Which I'm so excited about.
I am too.
I'm glad that we can talk about it a little.
Oh, I'm fucking thrilled. Yeah. And what I'm experiencing is just surrender after surrender after surrender. And then I become afraid and I'm not going to succumb to the fear. I'm mustering up every ounce of courage I have to just go in fully and just be 100% vulnerable. It really even just physically, I feel the vulnerability, just like, God, just stick the fucking knife in. It's just like, just get it over with. It's because it started to become so painful to withhold that experience from myself and from others.
It's so interesting to me too. I think everybody has a form of addiction they've had to overcome in their life. May it be sugar to negative self-talk to, whether it's substance. There's just such a spectrum of it. But what's so interesting, obviously, I believe that addiction occurs for a couple of reasons. It's like unhealed trauma that needs to be addressed. We're trying to protect ourselves from things. But essentially what it does end up becoming is a form of living on the edge when it's out of control, right? But the ultimate point of living on the edge is that full surrender. There's nothing higher and scarier and crazier and deeper than that.
You're not kidding. Yeah, you're not kidding. I just went on a trip for a few days out of town, and I experienced, in the romantic sense of vulnerability and just taking a risk. It really is like front seat on a roller coaster kind of feeling inside. And I'm just like, no, hang on. Don't let go. Don't let go. Don't let go. Don't close. Don't close, because that's what fear does. That's what ego does. But it's actually just not intelligent. That's the thing. Like I'm saying, that the cleverness of the ego and all the games it plays to hide and, obscure reality
or project and all the things.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It actually just doesn't work.
Yeah,
it doesn't achieve the desired result of the soul. It gets in the way. So it's like while the ego is, its intentions are good, it's just not very effective. And so even just in the past week, I've had incredible surrender experiences. Just going like, nope, I'm not giving into this.
So much magnetism, I can guarantee, is on its way because of that.
Yeah, and what's funny is also just surrendering my will in terms of just timing too. Having taken such a long break from dating and all of that, and just going like, I'm done doing it on my schedule. And then there'd be fears there. Yeah, but you're getting older. What's that gray hair? And whatever.
Completely.
And it's just like, no, I don't care. If I'm 80 when I come out of this shit, and then I try to date, it is what it is.
Absolutely. And it'll be deep.
Yeah, but at a year and a half, it was like, okay, cool. No, I trust a source. I trust that relationship. I trust the guidance, and more than anything, I trust myself.
But you're ready. Yeah.
And it's just been so amazing because my initial experience now, which is, still new and limited, has just been so expansive and beautiful. And it's so much better than anything I could have come up with intellectually had I self-willed it, So I'm sort of just watching God's handiwork going like, really? This is what I get for, I want to say being a good boy, but it's not the right way to state it, but it's like, this is what I get for surrendering and stop trying to control fucking everything and protect myself. And also what I get for accepting a little bit of prudence and discernment in the ways in which I enter into relationship and the people that I choose to enter into those with, So it's a really magical experience that I'm having right now because, as I said, just so many different areas of my being have just been like put on the table, and I'm allowing so much to be released. It's fun to observe as myself going like, wow, let's see how this sort of personality can be relinquished and surrendered, and see what comes to replace it. And
it's almost like
it's insane to watch.
Yeah, I think it's the ultimate high because it's the true self-discovery. And also you're doing it through another, which I think doing it together in partnership is what speeds up. It can just speed up spirituality deeply. It's so profound.
It sure seems that way.
Oh, yeah. You guys are only 3 months in. This is exciting. I'm so excited for you both.
Yeah, it's a wild
and
ride.
Cookie.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you the question because you are serving as such an expander for overcoming, addiction and recovery, and now all the other facets of your life that you've also been kind of approaching in the same way. You've rock bottomed, you've surrendered. What have been for you the biggest tools that have brought you to this state of being? So like the person who's sitting there listening, they're in their rock bottom. What would be, because you're the ultimate biohacker, like spiritual seeker, when it comes to food, everything, if you were to kind of come up with the 10 things that have been the most profound since you've tried most of them, what would those be?
Well, for me, the experience of just getting sober initially was all about aligning myself with spiritual principles that were present within the 12 steps. And, in the very beginning, it was like, cool, just get physically sober and then act like a goddamn maniac and do whatever you want, which is prevalent to some degree in some circles of recovery. It's like, who cares what you do? As long as you sober, yeah, you're good. You got in a fight today in traffic with some guy and road raged and got arrested. Cool. Did you drink? You didn't drink? Oh, you're cool. That's kind of like, you can do that. How many hookers did you bang last year? You didn't drink though, right? So it's sort of anything goes. So there was the anything goes period, which is like, hey, I'm cool. I'm not on drugs. So therefore I can do whatever I want, and still lived in a lot of self-will and a lot of insanity. And there's just, the repercussions of that much emotional and psychic damage and just mental, like physiologically the damage you do when you're using certain drugs and stuff. So in the beginning, it was like, cool, just stay sober and just hang on to recovery and the community in recovery and all of that. And then after a few years of that and life still being really unmanageable and still like looking from the outside like a drug addict, it's what they call a dry drunk. or a fire hazard, as I referred to myself for a period. You're so dry. You're just like irritable and crazy and just fucking nuts, And you're like, are you really sober? Well, no, there's emotional sobriety, physical sobriety and emotional sobriety.
And spiritual sobriety.
Yeah, and financial and sexual and all those things. But to give people resources, I mean, I don't know of anywhere else really in the world where there's such a wholesale experience of effectiveness in terms of recovery than within the 12 steps. And it's something that I talk about sort of cautiously because you have the principles of anonymity within 12-step programs. And, it's like if you're a movie star, right? And you're like, oh, I'm so, you're a total fuck up. You're Robert Downey Jr., whatever. You're like, oh, now I'm in AA, right? That's just breaking a tradition within AA. Yeah. And then someone's like, oh, cool. Wow, AA must work. And then that guy relapses and ends up back in court. You're like, that discredits AA. Or if someone, misbehaves in other areas of their life or, is just a jerk, then that sort of tarnishes the name of AA or whatever 12-step group. So, it's weird to sort of talk about, and I've had to just find ways to dance around it. But within the traditions, I can just say, like, right now, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with an addiction, find a 12-step group that fits your addiction, just period. That's the only thing I've ever seen work in a large scale way. And if you look at, if you really zoom out on recorded human history, the 12-step movement that started in 1939 is the only thing that's really ever worked in a long-standing way. There's, there are these
micro communities.
Yeah, and like white light experiences people have. I mean, I know of a musician who was a heroin addict for a long time. And one day he was in his room sick and Jesus came in his room and manifested and told him to stop doing drugs. And he did, and he never went back. And now he goes to like the mega church in Orange County and he's very happy and has a family and he's sober. That's very rare though, that people are able to find it through therapy, through church, religion. It happens, but it's just very rare where I find most of the people that have hit a significant bottom and really avail themselves to a 12-step, not just the meetings, but the way of life and actually integrating the principles is pretty much foolproof to me. So I think the physical sobriety part is the beginning, but then where a lot of people miss the boat in recovery is the emotional sobriety and understanding of getting to the root causes of why you drink.
I believe that.
And even people outside of AA think, oh yeah, that's those like weird groups in the church basement where people go to quit drinking. But that's not what it is. To me, the 12 steps are about learning how to live by spiritual principles so that you're fulfilled and on purpose. And when you're fulfilled and on purpose, you don't have a desire to drink because you're happy, so it's like, you've got to get to the underlying causes. And within that, I think once, at least I can only speak for myself, but, giving references is like, once you have that foundation and you're living with self-honesty, you have some degree of humility, you have a willingness to grow and to learn, you've made restitution of people that you've hurt, you're dealing with your character defects, your anger, your fears, your identifying ego, your learning how to disassociate from negative self-talk. These are all things that are inherent in the 12 steps, meditation and prayer, surrender,
community.
Acceptance, huge. Community, unconditional love, being of service to people, like making your life about other instead of about you, which is what the narcissistic addict does. I mean, you have to be that way. If you're dope sick, you can't, I'm not going to go work at the goddamn homeless shelter. Like, I need $20 right now and a ride downtown.
I feel like since you've used, there's inflation. Is it still just $20?
I don't know. I mean, back in my day, you could get well
like,
for 20
5
bucks.
Cents.
It wouldn't last. It wouldn't last long, but you could get well for $20. Okay. Actually, you know what?
It probably is.
At this one car wash on Hoover in Washington, you used to be able to get $8 balloons.
Wow, that was the special.
Yeah, and those they get you well for an hour or two.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. But beyond, just the foundation of a 12-step group, whatever, fits your poison, so to speak. I mean, then there's so much to do in terms of your spiritual growth. And even within Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean, it's right there in the book called Alcoholics Anonymous. We highly encourage you to go seek outside help.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've went to a place called Onsite in Nashville. That's like a, whole like childhood trauma, work through all that shit. I've done the Hoffman process. I've gone to Tony Robbins. I've gone to India on 21-day silent retreats. I've done Kundalini yoga for I'm coming up on 8 years now, Vedic meditation for about that long. So anything and everything to me that I can use to unravel trauma and get that out of my way, and then to deepen my relationship with God, whatever God is. I mean, I hesitate to use that word. It really freaks people out, but I'm becoming less apologetic. It's just like, I don't know. To me, on one hand, it's like if someone's that freaked out about God, you haven't hit bottom. Like, all right, go spend, go rack up more debt, go cheat on your wife more, go do more crack, whatever, It's like to hit a bottom, you got to get to the point where the word God doesn't bother you. I believe, honestly. And in the beginning, funny of AA, I've studied a lot of AA history just because to me, it's, again, we don't see it now because it's embedded in our culture, but in 1,000 years from now, in the annals of history, we'll look back on 1939 and you'll see this huge spike of the entire self-help movement was launched by Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just an absolute phenomenon in terms of human behavior. And in the history of AA, it's really funny because when they would go, the first two guys that founded it, they both got sober by just talking to each other, and they were able to help one another because they understood what other people outside couldn't. Your local pastor is not an alcoholic, like they don't get it, so you can't listen to them. Your wife might love you, but she's just nagging at you. She doesn't understand that you really need that drink. And when you got those two guys together, like, hey, this is how I feel. And then he opens his heart and says, man, this is how I feel too. Let's help each other. Once they discovered that and they were both struck sober, they went out to mental hospitals and started to kind of like try and convert alkies, I mean, because back in the day when AA started, it was very low bottom cases. It wasn't like now where, you have a couple of rough weekends. Oh, I had too many glasses of wine. I'm going to go to AA. I mean, back then you're on the street. You've lost everything, like bums, like literally like bums, So they'd go around to these churches and they would interview the guy in the mental hospital when he would come to from the delirium tremens and all that. And they'd say, okay, so you got a drinking problem. Yeah. And they go, well, are you ready to surrender your life to God? And if the guy was like, no, they go, well, good luck. Bye. I mean, you had to surrender on the spot. They'd want to hold hands and pray and all this stuff. I mean, it was not religious, but it was very like
spiritual.
Yeah. And spiritual. not esoteric. I mean, it's like, no, God's the only thing that can save you. Do you want that? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's do it. And then it would work. So it's interesting in that perspective. So I think you do have to hit a bottom and you have these deeper levels of surrender. But within that, there is the negative side of like sitting in AA meetings for 35 years, not doing any other work and just having your ego build an identity around like, I'm an old timer in the meeting. I sponsor 15 people and I still hate my life, which is like that dry drunk thing. And that's one of the pitfalls that I think is wise to look out for. And that's why delving into some of the other approaches to spirituality and stuff will help one avoid the risk of being concretized, because that happens sometimes. You start to build an ego identity around being a sober person and the milestone of whatever year you've hit. And at one point, I kind of just had to let go of all that. Even recently, sometimes I'm like, well, I say to someone, well, I'm 22 years sober. And I'm like, maybe I don't even have to say that. Maybe that's not even a thing anymore.
It's just another form of ego in a way. I love what you're saying.
It's not even like I'm bragging about it. I still identify as a sober man. And it's like...
And as a separate in a way.
It might not even be necessary to have that identification.
Totally.
It might just be like, hey, we have a dinner party and you offer me some wine. I'm like, oh, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Like that might be the story.
Totally.
It's not like, well, no, I haven't had one of those in 22 years.
My friend Ashley Neese wrote a really excellent piece on her blog for anybody who is looking for a resource of exactly what you're saying. And I think I'm going to paraphrase the title a little bit or chop it up, but why I don't identify as Alcoholics Anonymous anymore, why I'm just sober, or why I just don't drink or something like that. And it was a really beautiful piece of exactly what you're talking about. My whole intention this year has just been getting hyper mindful as much as I can in the present. And, and I love what you're saying. And this isn't to go against somebody who's identifying, but I think I'm really starting to get so interested in not identifying as any. I'm an Aquarius, so I'm one for like no labels in general. So I'm starting to take that so much deeper. But I love what you're saying is, the more that we disidentify as anything in a way is the more we become a collective and oneness and all of that. And so I just love that you're saying, be careful of that particular pitfall that you can go into. And there are many avenues you can take to deepen your spirituality while in that program.
There's a lot of ways in which you can get stuck in recovery because the ego likes safety. And so it'll build these sort of constructs. And you'll arrive at a certain place of understanding or development, and the ego will say, let's pour concrete on this. Let's stay here. Yeah. danger lurks on the other side of another awakening. So let's stay here. And for some of us, like myself, that stuckness gets so uncomfortable that like, I got to have another breakthrough, and you keep pushing through and pushing through. And my ultimate goal as an entity here is just absolute merging with God and enlightenment. So I'm not going to get stuck in like, credit cards. You know, no. We got to go way beyond, where I want to go in terms of evolution. But another thing I want to touch on too, which I think would be useful for people, is you have the spiritual framework, right? Which allows you, whatever your chosen modality is, let's just say something like Vedic meditation, right? Or any kind of meditation that's really effective, where you have a technique that's not just like,
I'm sitting here letting go of my thoughts, focusing on my breath.
Yeah. Any kind of mindfulness meditation, where I think when Eckhart Tolle's first book, The Power of Now, came out, that was also a huge pivotal moment for me in my recovery, because it was very much in alignment with the 12 steps. The 12 steps treat alcoholism as a mental illness. And the problem is not the alcohol. The problem is that you have an insane mind that tells you that either, fuck it, life's not worth it, I'm going to drink, or it tells you, you know what, I could probably just have one drink this time. But it's a mental illness. It really is. And it's that negative self-talk. Even on a scientific level, like how your neural pathways start to convert in terms of survival, it becomes like an obsession in a loop. I mean, absolutely. Your brain changes. Totally. And that's, in that book that I reference, Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the things that was a huge turning point for me, and then sort of developed into the Eckhart Tolle approach. I still want to say Eckhart Tolle, because
I did too.
When he first came out, that's how everyone said it.
I know.
But now like people say it right. So I feel like I have to conform to Tolle the right way. It looks like Tolle on paper. Yeah. But in that book, it says that glass in hand, we warped our minds. Actually, no, that's in the 12. The 12 and 12 is another book they call it. But yeah, we warped our minds. And I remember reading that, and someone pointed out to me like, Luke, you have a warped mind. You get a parking ticket and you think about it for fucking 5 days, and that's all you can think about is how you're going to get back at them and, whatever. I mean, just insanity. And that's a minor example, but I would just spin out into all of this negativity and self-talking and just, it's an obsession of really what alcoholism is, or addiction. It's an obsession of the mind in a very global sense. It's just, if you're drinking, it's on like another whiskey. If you're a sex addict, it's on another prostitute or pornography or whatever. But once you stop the behavior, you still have the obsession of the mind.
Yes.
It's just going to choose, like for me, when I got sober, it was like spending money. I would go, we had this store called Circuit City back in the day, in the prehistoric times. I remember Circuit City. Yeah, my first credit cards, I was just like, I need to buy 5 VCRs, and I would just go like run up my credit cards and just get high on the shopping, and it's like, God, I'm so pathetic. And I was so desperate just to change the way that I felt, because my mind was creating a world and a reality for me that was so uncomfortable. So once you get past the point of using exogenous sources to change your reality, then, I don't like to preach, but it behooves me to find ways within myself through my spirituality to change my perception of life.
Absolutely.
It's like right before I got sober, it's a great story. It's probably too late to digress and tell it now. But one of the things that led up to me hitting bottom was I was at a party and I was drunk, shocker. And my friend had a Rottweiler. He was my pot dealer. And I was fucking wasted, and I was like slapping the Rottweiler kind of on its hind quarters, like you do. And the Rottweiler was like, really? Fuck you. Boom. And he bit me on the face.
Wow.
Yeah, I have scars right here still. And that led to, I had to go to the emergency room, and then, there was a lawsuit, and I got all this money, and then I spent all that money on heroin. And there was all these things that happened that were, quote unquote, negative or positive. And it's funny now, because it's like every little thing that happens in my life now is really viewed as a positive.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I used to have to do drugs to change my version of reality. I got the parking ticket. Oh, I got the divorce. Someone died, someone's ill, whatever. Okay, I'm going to ingest something, whether it's, something that gets you high, or, the high of spending money, whatever it is, whatever your high is, right? And so I have to use that to change my perception of reality. But through practices like meditation, Kundalini yoga, I can actually learn how to observe my thoughts via the power of now, getting that framework where there's a me, which is my higher self, my soul, who I really am, that's embodying this 48-year-old male sexed meat suit. And I get to watch my personality right now as we speak. I get to watch my thoughts, watch my ego. There's a separation, there's a witness experience that starts to happen, and there's a little crack in the in the armor there, and some light shines through and you say like, oh shit, there's a me and then there's a thought. There's a me and that's watching the thought. Well, who's the one watching the thought? And that's where you start to really play with the malleable reality that reality really is shaped by my perception of it.
Completely.
So how can I now find practices, teachers, etc., that really build the skill of within myself and my own awareness, changing my perception of reality, not into a false reality, but actually to be in alignment with actual reality.
Completely. As present as possible.
Yeah, and actual reality is, thank God that Rottweiler bit me on the face. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, really, that was one of the peak moments of my life. It was traumatic. It hurt. It was scary. But it was necessary, necessary. And it's like, you could ask 100 people, hey, Luke got bit on the face by a Rottweiler, good or bad? You have to judge it. You have to label it bad, 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 all the way down the line. But if you know the whole story and the arc of the story and what that led to, you would have to say, if not neutral, that it was positive.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so it's learning how to gain control of your mind so you don't have to use drugs or other medications, whatever they might be, to do it for you. And that's really what it is. And there's so many resources available. Aside from the metaphysical realm, something that, I'm really into the health and the biohacking and stuff.
Well, also sharing because, you have had the luxury and it wasn't a luxury at the time because you've obviously paid for it, like the Hoffman Institute's $4,000 and like being able to fly to Tennessee and do these other things. But for the person who maybe doesn't have that accessibility right now, because you have so many resources on your site and links we can go to, as well as I know Kundalini is accessible at least through Rama TV online, $14.99 a month if somebody's wanting to practice. I personally practice Kundalini as well. Or for the person who's interested in Vedic, it's a one-time training and then you have that mantra and you can do it. What are the others you were going to mention?
Well,
which I do practice. I've been practicing that for 4 years.
I want to give a shout out to my teacher, Jeff Kober, who's a Vedic meditation teacher.
And also sober.
Yeah, and a great actor. People like I turn him on to people, and they're like, "I saw that dude on The Walking Dead." I was like, "Yeah, he's cool. He's a cool guy." But he does something interesting with the Vedic. He just charges a flat fee of $1,000 now.
Oh, great!
Because in the Vedic tradition, it's like it's always been on a sliding scale, and like you have to give a week's pay, which for some people a week's pay is $100,000.
Yeah.
Some people it's $100. It's just I always thought that was kind of weird. It's like that TM. Like TM is kind of weird in that way with the payments and stuff.
Financially, I think it turns a lot of people off.
Got me a little funky. And anyway, I talked to Jeff a few months ago. I was like, what does it cost? And he was like, you know what? I got tired of all that shit. It's $1,000 for everyone, whatever.
Awesome.
And that's 4 days of training. So
and it's a lifetime of a practice, truthfully.
Dude, you could pull up an armored car right now and go, Luke, here's $1 billion cash. We're going to give it to you right now, but we're going to remove your capacity to meditate for the rest of your life. There's no way I would take it. There's nothing that I value. Well, there's things I value more than meditation, but it's something that I could never live without.
I love it just as much.
So other resources. Well, what I wanted to really talk about was, now that I know so much about health and about hormones and neurotransmitters and circadian rhythm and all these things, you're a fan of Jack Kruse like me. Now when I meet anyone that's sober and they're still suffering from depression or anxiety, or they're on meds, they have insomnia, really what's going on with most people is they're low dopamine.
And just that's an epidemic in society.
Oh my God,
in general.
We're gonna look back on this time period of all these devices that we're all addicted to, the blue light that's coming off your iPhone, your iPad, your computer, the flicker rate of all the LED lights that's brainwashing us and damaging our eyes and our brains. So,
and all the lights in the street, I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah. So if someone is like, I don't have $5,000 for the Hoffman process or whatever, what do I do right now? And this sounds, I have such a hard time getting people to do this shit because it's free and because it's relatively easy, they won't do it.
It's simple. True. Yeah.
If you get up every morning and watch the sunrise for the first 20 minutes and look at that red light.
And if you're naked on top of it.
And grounded.
Awesome.
And grounded,
in the earth,
But really, I honestly, again, like looking at the big picture of where we are in terms of a species right now, we are zoo animals.
Oh, completely.
And we are domesticated in these homes where we're cut off from natural light. We're cut off from the elements that are hot and cold. Our nervous systems are so fucking weak.
Oh, man.
Emotionally, we're so fucking weak. Like with... especially the generation that's in the room looking at us, no offense. It's like, I've hired like millennials and I say like a word and they're like,
No, these guys are great. They're like love avoidant. They're tough. These are tough chicks.
You want to hear a funny story? I had an employee working for my fashion school, and I have an Amazon Prime account. So I was thinking about this a couple of days ago because I was using one, but she had gone in, I said, we need to order extension cords or whatever, computer hard drive or something like that. So I gave her the login for R, which is my Amazon account. And I had ordered some condoms online, which is like, I'm a fucking adult, whatever, it's not like I'm ordering sex toys.
Oh no, you guys must see, I order the weirdest shit all the time. Because Lila gets the notifications totally.
So I didn't know, but a few months later, after that person no longer worked for us, my partner Lauren was like, oh yeah, dude, like she got totally freaked out when she logged into Amazon. She was like having a fucking panic attack, got all weirded out because she saw that you'd ordered condoms. I'm like, dude, we are too fragile.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, this is a problem.
It's such a double coin too, because it's like so responsible. And there's just so many, it's such a conversation. As a society in general right now, everything that's happening, even with like call out culture and stuff, which there is such a need for transition and change 100%, but more than anything, and I think that's what you're going to pivot into, we need to fucking strengthen our subconscious and nervous system and stop making it about the outside world and start to empower ourselves individually.
Yeah. It's a victim mentality, and that's not to say that there aren't victims.
No, absolutely. Everyone's a victim.
And I'm all for empowerment, but self-empowerment is the number one empowerment.
That's where you get your power. Damn it, that's where you see change.
And if you don't have that, then you're going to go around trying to solve all the problems in the world without being very effective.
1,000%.
But where I was really going was really in alignment with nature.
Okay.
And this has, it's all part of it. It has to do with your emotional resilience because it has to do with your nervous system. And that's one thing that's great about Kundalini yoga. It really fortifies your nervous system. So when the flight gets canceled, the person breaks up with you, the whatever ad infinitum, that you have the resiliency to go like, okay, wow, taken aback for a moment, but here I am, I'm back because you have your breath.
Absolutely.
And if you can use things like sun gazing, grounding, cold thermogenesis, aka ice baths, infrared saunas, getting out in nature, staying connected. That's what really builds your nervous system because that's what gives you voltage.
Totally.
And what's happened is we're just completely domesticated now. We're living in artificial light and all of these EMFs from the Wi-Fi and the cell towers. And it's just like we're not living in a natural environment. And so that has a lot to do with how, especially the sun and our relationship to natural light, not just sun gazing, but even just being outdoors
in the
more.
sun, and this crew knows about it because I talk about it so much.
Like right now we're sitting in here and it's the afternoon and there's daylight coming in. So
and we have blue light hitting us.
Yeah, but if I asked you, I was like, hey, are we getting natural light today? Someone would be like, well, yeah, look, there's a window right there. But see, windows cut out half of the UV spectrum. So we're actually
UVB, right?
Yeah, so we're actually getting a diffused fake light because think about it, in nature, glass doesn't exist.
Totally. Absolutely.
And so if you think about our relationship to light and the sun and the planets, especially people that listen to your show, they might be aligned, with astrology and understanding where we fit in the universe and the solar system. Our bodies are literally solar panels and they're computerized, electrified solar panels. And that part of us is what controls our mood, our neurotransmitters, our hormones, our impulses, our ability to be happy, our ability to love and to be loved.
To absorb nutrients.
Yeah, all of that.
Basic, yeah.
All of that. And so that's the thing I get, because I slang supplements on my my website. And there's $12,000 devices you can get that I have that are awesome. And I love all that stuff. Yeah. But for people like, but I don't, where do I start? It's too confusing or too expensive. I'm like, if you just get in the sun and you get an ice bath,
eat a couple oysters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, some fish.
Get some DHA. Yeah. It's like your life will and if you stop blue light at night, which is a commitment. People have a hard time with that. You have to adjust your devices. You got to change all the lighting in your house.
Or you can just be like us here. Poor Max, we have blackout shades and it goes candlelight at dusk.
Yeah.
It. He has an electronics
that's the best.
room.
That's the best. Yeah. And, see, what sucks is we're so habituated to the domesticated zoo animal life that we live. It's like when I was just on this trip with my lovely lady friend, she put up with me, but we checked in the Airbnb and I was like, cool, okay, I got out all my light bulbs. Yeah. I packed like amber light bulbs and I changed all the light bulbs. And she's like, really, dude? We don't know each other that well yet.
You're crazy. Yeah.
And I'm like, listen,
you're dedicated.
2 million years of evolution.
Yeah.
And I'm not going backwards. Yeah, if we have to shoot something cool, turn on the blue lights, whatever, I'll live. But it's like,
it's a choice. Yes.
It's not insane to change the light bulbs in your house. It's insane to fucking look at blue light in a spectrum that doesn't,
sitting down,
and it doesn't even exist in nature.
It doesn't.
Those lights we're looking at right now and the lights on our phones, that's not what the sun is.
It's
the
a full
sun,
spectrum.
Yeah. And so
I do want to do a mini plug for anybody listening because it's about to launch, but each of the retreat houses, I will say like confidently, that's why you have to come and host something at one of them. But the one in Yosemite especially, there's zero light pollution. It has a creek. There's natural water nearby where you can plunge.
I was obsessing on your stories last night.
We have an infrared sauna there, a biomat there. I mean, it's going to be literally this, how to get you back fully to nature. And then you get complete access to all of the workshops.
That's so beautiful that you're doing that. You're a step ahead of me on that dream. I'd love to do
you're going to come
like
on
that
in.
Too. Yeah. I guess you could say coached or mentored a lot of guys, that are in recovery and things like that. And, there's the spiritual realm and there's the metaphysical realm and all of that. But once I get them doing cryotherapy, ice baths, sun gazing, grounding, they get off meds, they start sleeping, they don't have anxiety anymore, they don't have depression.
Yeah.
They just lose all these issues.
Just start to balance.
Oh, it's fucking crazy. Yeah. If someone comes to me and they're like, dude, I'm on meds and I'm, it's ruining my life. What do I do? I'm like, well, I'm not a doctor. Don't stop taking your meds. Keep working with your doctor and tell them you want to wean off. But if you start doing the natural protocols and get in that environment,
you'll be supported enough.
And then all of a sudden they're just like, yeah, that just went away. That's not a thing anymore.
Totally.
And I'm not recommending someone go off their meds.
No.
I would never be that irresponsible.
I've actually seen people do that and it's really, really unsafe.
Oh yeah. I was on psych meds in early sobriety. And I was oh my God, I was a train wreck and I tried to stop them and I got really crazy.
I have to segue into one other thing too. When Eckhart Tolle, I think this is actually a really interesting thing to note for people because of wherever we might be at. But the first time I attempted to read that it was in 2008 and I was, like working as a waitress at the Laugh Factory, so poor, the lowest self-worth on the planet at that point. I remember being in my bath in my East Hollywood studio apartment with cockroaches that lived with me and trying to attempt to read that. I was actually talking to my friend about this the other day and I was like, is this in another language? My consciousness was not at all able to comprehend what, how, huh? This is crazy to me. And I also kind of don't even understand what's being said. And then I just revisited it over the holidays and continue because that's sort of my whole intention this year. And I'm like, oh, this is so easy. Not easy. Granted, it's a practice. I know
exactly what you're talking about.
And I will have to credit that to Kundalini and Vedic meditation and all of these things that we do.
I've had that experience too. There was a book that was gifted to me before I was sober. It's a really thick book. It's ccalled I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. Wow. And it's deep non-duality. Eastern mysticism kind of stuff, Indian. And I remember I would read the back cover.
Alone.
The back cover. And I would just be like, there's something in it. I was like, this is the shit. I don't get it. Yeah. It was something about say there's a building. I have the book. I think I read that part on my very first podcast, Return of the Jedi, #1. But it's say there's a building and then, the ages come and the storms come and the building is gone. Would you say the space is still there? So is the building really there? One of those kind of things.
Totally.
And I was like, whoa,
if the tree falls to anybody.
Exactly. That kind of thing. And I'd be super high, just going whoa. But then I would open the book and I'd be like,
I don't understand anything.
There's something here. And I knew there was. Fast forward 15 years maybe of picking up that book again and going oh, duh. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I just want to take that note too for anybody listening. And this doesn't have to be, an investment of so much time until you can kind of hit these spaces. The information that Luke's giving you here and now, where you might be at in your life, it doesn't have to be, you're in recovery. It can be anywhere where you're just sitting and you're like, what do I do to kind of get a hold on reality in a way and also presence and then also health to match so that we can be happy and present and accept things and surrender. The simplicity of just starting exactly those free things you were talking about, your meditation practice, whatever it might be. These things open up our consciousness to be able to go to these next levels. And I think that, obviously anybody who's doing Unblocked, you're really addressing childhood and all sorts of stuff that I think that it's anything that's going to help you feel homeostasis and worthy. That's it. That's the answer in many ways.
Totally.
And that's basically what you're telling people. There are very accessible places to go with this.
You know, another thing too worth mentioning, and your guided meditations are awesome for this too, by the way. Yeah, I was just actually talking to Rhiannon that I was mentioning earlier, and she does your course too, by the way. Yeah. And she loves it. Yeah. And she's like, oh, I just listened to one of Lacy's meditations. I'm like, I know those things are deep, dude.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Also, I have to let's give a shout out to her, because I just saw your picture in Santa Fe and I was like, what's that weave that you're wearing? And then I clicked and I saw her work and I was like, oh my God, I need those cropped.
Ghost Dancer. Amazing.
At Ghost
amazing
Dancer.
Artist,
incredible weaver. So go check her out.
Instagram is The Ghost Dancer. Yeah.
At the
amazing
Ghost
artist.
Dancer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we were talking about your program, and I'm like, yeah, I'm super into the theta vibe. Like that float tanks are like my favorite thing ever.
Yeah, my fiance's too. I can't stand them.
Oh, really?
But he loves them.
Yeah. So any kind of like binaural beats or float tanks, or when I do neurofeedback, by the way, is expensive.
Powerful.
But for anyone suffering from PTSD, trauma, neurofeedback is really, really
and
effective.
EMDR is another plug.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. I want to try that. But anywho, I love those things that just kind of really take you into that space. So for someone who's challenged by meditation, listening to guided ones is a really good place to start.
I agree.
And to help you like get lift off until you can just kind of do it on your own. But I have to say, for me, it's something that's been really profound and continues to be in terms of just reprogramming my whole psyche is listening to audio. So I got the Power of Now on CD back in the day, and I would listen to Wayne Dyer and Stuart Wilde, and
a lot of this you can find for free on YouTube.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And even podcasts like the Ram Dass podcast is insane. I mean, I've listened to every single episode.
Don't listen while driving, to any of them. You're like,
many of them over and over again.
They're so relaxing.
There's a lot to be, I mean, you can really learn a lot from audio.
So good.
And it's something, like this podcast here that you can do while you're engaged in something else, but it still sinks in. So that was a huge part of my reprogramming too, was not only reading in a contemplative, studious way, if that's a word. Like when I would read spiritual text, it's like I'm reading it one word at a time, going over maybe one sentence 20 times.
To absorb,
Yeah, I mean, like not, oh yeah, I read that book. No, like I'm going to read a book for the next 10 years. Like Emmett Fox, Sermon on the Mount.
Completely.
I read that book almost every day for 15 years. And it's a short book. There's not that much to it.
Yeah.
But it's just, I would find these nuggets, like one of his principles is about enemy soldiers, that negative thoughts are like enemy soldiers. And if you let them dig and entrench into the field, they're really hard to get to.
Yeah.
But if you can pick them off as they present themselves, you can win the war, something to that effect. But it was a great metaphor. Great. And so, and then that just integrates into my mind. I wake up and like I spill the smoothie in the kitchen and I'm like, oh, see, so annoying. I hate life. And I'm like, enemy soldier.
Yeah.
That's the first one. There he comes over the ridge. He's trying to dig his foxhole.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck you, enemy soldier. I'm not going there. I'm like, wow, what a great moment to like play with this green dye on my floor, this spirulina. Wow, it's really beautiful. Let's make some art. It's like,
yes.
But yeah, I would just say, man, for people getting down with like the really enlightening audio is huge too.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I listen to a ton of it myself driving still all the time. Not still like I've arrived anywhere. I'm such a work in process.
No, of course. But there's tools that are useful for a time and then you kind of let them go. And then there's tools that kind of just remain. And for me, the audio has been that way. And I guess probably one of the main reasons I started a podcast is I was like, wow, I'm listening to all these people. I could be sitting down and talking to them and sharing them with people that might not have discovered them. And I would also like to shout out my all-time favorite spiritual teachers, a man named David R. Hawkins.
Oh, the best, And they're very familiar too, but continue with that.
Yeah, and that was one that I found, I think the Power of Now, God, I probably found that, I don't know.
Was letting go your first?
No. The Power of... I'm sorry, not the Power of Now. Power versus Force. Sorry, Power versus Force. And that one I got. And the reason I liked it is because he was friends with Bill Wilson, who's the co-founder of AA. And,
wow.
Yeah, and David Hawkins was... When he died, he was sober like 55 years or something. Yeah. And so he was there in the early days when Bill Wilson was doing LSD. And
all the
Hawkins was a shrink. And he was friends with Harry Tebow, who was Bill Wilson's shrink. And there was all this trippy... It's when the spirituality of the New Thought movement in the 30s merged with psychiatry. And there was this really interesting thing. Yeah, there was this really interesting thing that happened. And David Hawkins was kind of at the forefront of that. And he was a psychiatrist in New York City for 50 years.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. I used to go see him speak in Sedona, and he treated thousands of alcoholics, and he had it down. And then he went like way beyond the beyond with it. Yeah. But his other books, including the last one, Letting Go, that one is probably the best entry point. I'm glad you talk about it with your people, because it's so deep, but the way he wrote that one is so much more simple than his other books. His other books, one of his books is called The Eye of the I, I think Reality versus Subjectivity. And that's like that book, Dense. I Am That, where I got it and I'm like, I'm like just one word at a time, you know.
My brain's melting.
It took me 2 years to read that book. And I read it almost every day because I'm like, I don't want to read it. So, I read that book. I want to read it so I can internalize it. And then now I go back and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally get that.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it's amazing. But there's a lot of audio you can get of David Hawkins too. And he's just
great.
Had a really amazing framework for the human experience using his scale of consciousness, you know, from the animal kingdom going up into the angelic realms. And so it gives you kind of a marker of where you might be, which affects, of course, all of your relationships and finance and mental health and emotional health. And it gives you something to sort of strive for, that I want to get to the upper levels. And so you'll be aligned at different times in your life with different teachings that calibrate at a different level that might be appropriate. That's why, you know, the 12 steps are a great entry point, because they're based on the principle of unconditional love. That's what the 12 steps are. It's like, come here, man, we'll love you, you freak.
Which
coming off the street, you know what I mean?
Principle of like being present. It's kind of the foundational principle of a lot of things. Yeah.
Right. And then once that's in lock, kind of what we're talking about later, then, oh, wow, let me, you know, study some teachings of the Maharishi or do the meditation and that. And then there's higher realms that wouldn't be accessible to the kid who's like 22 and just getting off crystal meth. He's like, what? Maha who?
Yeah.
You're going to fucking meditate?
But
I'll go to a meeting every day and smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
So I love Hawkins because he gives you a really wide spectrum of experience. And it also, he's so great at, he died, but he's so great at giving an explanation as to why there are these dark forces and evil energies in the universe, and that it's all God.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, oh, God is over here in the light.
The polarity.
Exactly. That, you know, it's like Yogi Bhajan said, if you don't see God in all, you don't see God at all.
I believe it. That's just called shadow work, man. And back to what we were talking about before in fragility, and just nothing outside of you matters in a way. It's everything inside of you. That's true shadow integration, you know, that it's not that's actually me and I'm that, and we're together and we're totally connected. It's that true integration of shadow. So
and to have compassion for shadow too, you know,
that's the huge,
it's so easy to look at, you know, the world stage of politics and social issues, and even going back in history and thinking, oh, they're bad. You know, now we have this political climate, like where it's like, I hate those people that hate people.
Yeah, I know.
But this more of the same, you know. So Hawkins had a really great way of just explaining the different calibrations of consciousness, and that there's different humans or at different points on the scale, and that they're all innocent. Yeah. Even the ones on the lower scale. And
that we all go through them.
Yeah, and they believe they're doing the right thing.
Totally.
And the most evil human you can imagine, in the moment of their evil, they believe they're doing good.
And they just, exactly.
It doesn't make what they're doing good or acceptable.
Make it okay.
But you can have compassion for their suffering because they're coming out of their own pain. Absolutely. And their pain's being inflicted on others. Not to say that they shouldn't be stopped, not that you should condone, you know, anything that harms anyone else, of course. But I don't know. I find that having, like, again, a more zoomed out worldview makes me take all the little nuances of our societal problems a little less seriously. Like,
absolutely.
I don't feel as compelled to go save the world in that naive sense. It's more like, how can I bring light right now when I walk in 7-Eleven?
Yep. Yeah, or on this podcast. Or on your podcast.
You know, maybe, you know, the 7-Eleven would be a starting point, but it's like that.
I mean, I just don't see you even going into 7-Eleven.
Actually, I don't. I don't know where that even came from.
I like that metaphor. Wait, I have an even bigger question.
Yeah.
I fly to Ireland tomorrow, or I'm flying to Paris, then Ireland tomorrow, and I know that you're coming out with a course that I'm super stoked about.
My nemesis. Travel.
Is it to Europe? You hate that flight?
Just, you know, I love I would say like I love going to different places,
that's
but I hate
right.
traveling.
I heard this when you were talking to Dr. Jack Cruz on your podcast, which is a great episode. You have 2 of them.
Yeah, another
with
one.
him.
I have another one with Jack Cruz coming out in a month or so.
Right. And you were trying all the angles. You were like, but I plugged my biomat in. He's like, it's still plugged in, so just tell us about your course that's coming out.
Well, it's just selfishly because for the past 22 years that I've been exploring all these different alternative healing and health modalities and supplementation and practices and devices. And now this thing they call biohacking, kind of like learning and understanding your own biology and dealing with that yourself rather than taking it to a doctor to fix it for you. One of the things I have not been able to fully fix, I guess you could say, is the negative effects of travel. When I fly specifically, and especially on really long flights, I just get completely wrecked. And so if I'm traveling for business, I'll have to buffer an extra day of recovery and like pay for a hotel, rental car, whatever, just because I can't fly in somewhere and be normal. I'm just totally tweaked. Going on a vacation with a loved one or family or something, it's like, again, have to book extra days in the beginning of the trip and once I get home to just recover. And so I've been working for many, many years at putting together really all of these different practices, which might include taking supplements or different devices, and then also just how to get in alignment with the circadian rhythm and to beat jet lag and things like that. So I finally just last year started documenting on video all of the wacky shit that I do when I travel. I mean, if you see me get on an I wish I could bring a video crew on an airplane with me and
I bet it's just, you must look nuts.
Set up my JetBlue Mint seat, with all my shit. And I actually, one of the hacks is like, go on trips half as often and fly first class.
Oh, like, honestly, I do. I did business this one.
I can't. And I'm not trying to be like highfalutin. I just like coach.
You need to be able to sleep and
coach
stuff like
is a miserable experience. I know that's not accessible to everyone. For a lot of my life,
it wasn't for me either.
I mean, are you kidding me? I was lucky to even get on a plane at all. It didn't put me in the fucking cargo department. Like even a seat in the back was too much for a long time. But no, that's part of it. But I just have all these practices, and then finally I started just doing mini bits of content about them because people would ask. They'd see me on the airplane doing an Insta Live or something of a supplement or this thing I'm plugging in. They're like, what is that? What is that? So I started making longer form videos and then eventually came up with like what's a couple hours worth of content just on every single possible thing you could apply.
Amazing.
From free ones like, sun gazing, especially when you land in a different time zone. I don't care how tired you have to get up, get your bare feet, hopefully on wet ground, not on a city street ideally because there's electric currents.
No, in Paris it's like the park. Yeah.
Yeah. And looking at the sun. So there, there's ice baths, there's saunas, there's all that. But there's also a lot of supplements and a lot of different devices and things like that you can use. And there's of course like a scale of, how much those things cost. Some of them are free and some you have to spend money on. But so I just decided, I always wanted to do an online course and I don't want to do something that someone's already done. There's a lot of great information out there already. And I thought, well, I don't think anyone's as obsessed with fixing travel as me because it fucks me up worse than anyone I know. Yeah. I fly to New York with my business partner, Lauren. We get off the plane. She's like, cool, I'm going to Barney's.
Oh, I know. That's how my partner is.
I'm like, what?
I know. I'm just
I'm going to sleep for 3 days. Like, what are you talking about? Totally. I can't find the baggage claim. I'm all disoriented. I'm dizzy, irritable. I mean, I'm just a freaking wreck. And so I'm like, God damn it, I'm fixing this. And I have systematically, like piece by piece by piece, made it better and better all the time. And so,
I cannot wait for this.
So I'm finally...
tomorrow I'm like, doing business class was the one. I'm going to drink 8 ounces of my water with chlorella for every hour I'm on the flight. I'm doing compression socks. I'm doing fasting. I'm all the things. If I have sun in Paris, I'll do that. But
the compression socks are good. I just wore those on my flight yesterday and I have a compression shirt and EMF blocking clothes.
Wow. So cool it's metal.
Too. I have these Faraday, these like slacks that are a Faraday cage.
Okay.
So they have this metal thread in them that prevent RF frequency.
Wow, that's probably what messes everyone up the most.
It is. There's really high EMF. You know what really sucks? I learned from Jack Cruz actually is that he only flies on planes without Wi-Fi.
He does.
Yeah, and I'm like, but I want the Wi-Fi.
I don't use it.
Yeah, he'll book flights just specifically so they don't have Wi-Fi. And also, I don't do this, but one of the best hacks is flying at night.
Yeah, that's what I chose as well. So I can do red glasses the whole time.
And less solar radiation. There's just less weird electrostatic in the atmosphere at night. But I just don't it tweaks me too bad. Just like the sleep rhythm gets too weird. But the compression clothing is really good. And I have an EMF blocking little beanie.
Wow. So we have so much to learn. There's a lot. Yeah,
there's a lot of things that you can do now. Some people that get bothered by it less, they'll do less. They're like, cool, I'll just do the sun gazing thing to beat the jet lag.
Eat the thing or not eat the thing, whatever I'm supposed to do.
But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do to make it less brutal. Yeah.
Okay, we'll share that in the show notes because that's exciting. And anything else going on that we should check out?
What else is going on right now? I don't have a date, but I do have an event at Rama in Venice coming up, which is called the High Love Experience that I did in October in New York. And it was a big hit. It was amazingly fun for me. I turned it into a podcast episode. So I'm going to complete that workshop again there.
Okay.
The same format, some Kundalini yoga and some inner work. That was pretty powerful. And then I'll have one coming up here in the next couple months at Sacred Space in Miami too.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I'll be doing in 2019. I want to definitely do some more workshops and, because I do a lot of speaking where I drop in, paleo effects or like these big conferences and I go to a talk and that's fun because you can reach a lot of people. But I like more intimacy. I'd rather take 30 or 40 people and we're going to have a goddamn experience. Not just a PowerPoint of
information.
Here's how to be happy and healthy, but let's do some stuff more experiential. So
that's exciting.
Doing that. And when you're up and running, I want to come do.
Oh, you have to.
Do something at your
it's going to be your haven. You're going to love it.
I'm telling you, last night I was stalking your stories. I was like, oh my God, this place is a creek.
Yeah.
So dope. And the river nearby.
I know. Well, there's two. So one's always running. It's a 3. I know you'd find a spring right away too. That's the next mission is finding a spring. But the water's very sulfur rich. So there has to be some hot springs that are undiscovered. But so you have the Yosemite melt off May through October. They have a river that runs through that's a freshwater river. And then there's one that's always running. It's a 3-mile hike in the backyard. It's insane.
Oh,
so you're going to be.
That's the best. It's so inspiring. That's my dream.
Well, I can't wait to have you there. And we're so grateful you showed up today and came and spoke with us.
Oh, man, me too. I was excited to ask. I like your show, so it's cool to be on it too.
Well, I like yours.
Great.
Go check out those episodes. If you haven't listened to them, go check out every episode.
The last one you did was really great too. I mean, it's funny when and I'm sure you experienced this too, but I don't think people quite grasp, maybe they do, but I get the sense not to the depth that I do. But how much I'm actually learning and listening to people in an interview. When we did that one, for me, it's I'm cheating and having a private session with you. And I'm just I'm going to call it a podcast. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, it's for other people. But really, I'm all right, how do I fix this shit, Lacy?
Yeah.
And that one was really good. We had a couple of breakthroughs when I was looking at my, what do they call blocks?
Yeah.
Around money and stuff. And I discovered a couple of them, but even just in our conversation on that interview with you on my show, I forget which one it was. I think it was about spirituality and money.
Totally.
And
that's huge.
If you're a sober person, you're supposed to stay humble and just be spiritual, and you can't have
be religious. It's thou shalt not want. It's free.
And that was one of the ones I was like, oh my God, I've been carrying that for a long time. So
I'm glad.
So I encourage people that obviously are following your work to go check that out because you get to just really cut loose. And,
it was such a fun episode.
Yeah,
and
I think
Cookie sat with me the whole time.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Well, thank you so much today, Luke.
For sure.
And we'll definitely be linking that course because I have a speaking tour this year. I need those hacks because it wrecks me just as much as you're talking about. Yeah. Travel is so hard for me. So hard.
Some of us are more sensitive. It's weird. Same thing with EMFs. Some people that doesn't seem to, I know it hurts everyone, but some they're aware of how it bothers them, which is kind of me. And I think that's a lot of the flying, but there's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do to help.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you.
For sure. Thank you.